Pay attention to 15-year-old Holly Newton walking through Hexham town center with her friends after school. She seems safe in broad daylight, but she has just texted a friend a chilling prediction. He's going to follow me until I talk to him. She is right. Her ex-boyfriend, 16-year-old Logan MacPhail, has been stalking her from the shadows for exactly 45 minutes. He isn't here to talk. He has lured her into an alleyway where in just 60 seconds, he will stab her 36 times with such force that the knife blade snaps in half. He will claim his mind went blank, but the judge will see it differently, lifting his anonymity to expose the face of a teenage murderer. This is the story of how an obsession turned fatal in broad daylight. This is the story of Holly Newton. Holly Newton was 15 years old when her life was stolen from her. She was a student at Queen Elizabeth High School in Hexham, a quiet town in Northumberland. At school, Holly was known as a quiet, dedicated student. She wasn't the loudest person in the room or the one constantly seeking attention. She had a tight-knit group of friends, the kind of close friendships that teenage girls form, where you tell each other everything, where you support each other through the drama and difficulties of adolescence, where you believe these friendships will last forever. Holly was preparing for her GCSEs, the important exams that would determine so much of her future. Which sixth form she could attend, what university she might go to, what career paths would be open to her. She should have been collecting those GCSE results in 2024, nervously opening the envelope with her friends, celebrating or commiserating depending on the grades. She should have been moving forward into the next chapter of her life. Sixth form, college, university, career, relationships, marriage, children. All the milestones that make up a human life were waiting for her. But Holly's future was cruelly taken away on January 27th, 2023, by a boy who couldn't accept that she wanted to move on with her life without him. Holly had met Logan MacPhail through the Army Cadets, a youth organization that teaches military skills and discipline. They began dating and were in a relationship for approximately 18 months. For a while, things seemed fine. Holly probably enjoyed having a boyfriend, someone to text throughout the day, someone to spend time with, someone who made her feel special. For 18 months, they were together. But then Holly made a decision that every person has the right to make. She ended the relationship. Maybe she had fallen out of love. Maybe she realized they weren't compatible. Maybe she wanted to focus on school or spend more time with friends. The reasons don't really matter. Holly had the right to end a relationship she no longer wanted to be in. That's a fundamental part of human autonomy and dignity. But Logan MacPhail couldn't accept Holly's decision. He became deeply unhappy when she broke up with him. More than that, he became obsessed with the idea that Holly might see someone else, might date another boy, might give to someone else the affection and attention she was no longer giving him. In MacPhail's mind, Holly belonged to him, and her attempt to establish independence and autonomy was unacceptable. The night before Holly was murdered, Logan MacPhail did something that should have set off every alarm bell imaginable. He traveled more than 40 miles from his home in Gateshead to Holly's house in Haltwhistle. This wasn't a short walk or a quick bus ride. This was a deliberate journey covering significant distance, requiring planning and determination. When MacPhail arrived at Holly's house, he didn't knock on the door or try to speak to her openly. Instead, he hung around outside the house in the dark, watching, waiting, lurking. He stayed there until 1:00 a.m. Hours spent in the cold and dark, staring at the house where Holly was sleeping, probably trying to decide what to do, maybe trying to work up the courage to do something he'd been fantasizing about. Eventually, MacPhail's mother realized her son was missing and reported him to the police. Officers found MacPhail outside Holly's house in the early morning hours and took him home. This should have been a massive red flag. This should have triggered immediate intervention. A teenage boy traveling 40 miles to stand outside his ex-girlfriend's house until 1 a.m. is textbook stalking behavior. It shows obsession, determination, and a complete disregard for boundaries and consent. Holly's mother, Michaela Trussler, was understandably terrified by this incident. She contacted the police to report her concerns about MacPhail's behavior. She arranged a meeting with officers for the evening of January 27th to discuss what could be done to protect her daughter. She even contacted Holly's school and requested that Holly not be allowed to leave if MacPhail was seen outside. She wanted her daughter kept safe within the school building until she could be picked up. But on the morning of January 27th, Holly told her friends that MacPhail was basically stalking her. She was extremely nervous, not just worried or concerned, but genuinely frightened. She understood that MacPhail's behavior wasn't normal, that his inability to accept their breakup had crossed into something dangerous. She messaged a friend with words that would later haunt everyone who read them. "He's gonna follow me until I talk to him." Holly knew MacPhail was obsessed with her. She knew he wasn't going to leave her alone. But like many victims of stalking, especially young victims, she probably didn't realize just how much danger she was in. She probably thought that if she just talked to him one more time, explained things one more time, made him understand that it was really over, then maybe he would finally leave her alone. After school on January 27th, Holly asked her mother if she could go into town with her friends instead of coming straight home. It was a normal request. Teenagers want to hang out with their friends, especially on a Friday afternoon. Mikala would later describe allowing Holly to go as the biggest mistake of my life, words that no parent should ever have to say about a normal parenting decision. But how could Mikala have known? Yes, MacPhail had shown up at their house the night before. Yes, they had reported his behavior to police. Yes, there was a meeting scheduled for that evening to discuss protective measures, but it was broad daylight in a town center. Holly would be with friends. Surely she would be safe in public, surrounded by people in familiar streets. What parent would expect their child to be murdered under those circumstances? On the afternoon of January 27th, Logan MacPhail left his special school on Femicide early. He traveled by bus to Hexham, another deliberate journey requiring planning and determination. He wasn't impulsively showing up in Holly's town. This was calculated. This was intentional. He knew Holly would likely be in town after school. He went there specifically to find her. And for 45 minutes to an hour, MacPhail stalked Holly through the streets of Hexham. He followed her and her friends as they walked through the town center, maintaining enough distance that Holly wouldn't immediately spot him, but close enough that he could track her movements. He watched where they went, what they did, who they talked to. He waited for the right moment, the moment when he could get Holly alone, when he could separate her from her friends, when he could do what he had planned. Holly probably felt uneasy that afternoon even if she didn't see MacPhail. That's what stalking does to victims. It creates a constant state of vigilance and anxiety. You're always looking over your shoulder, always wondering if they're watching, always on edge. Holly had told her friends she was nervous. She knew MacPhail was obsessed with her. She probably felt his presence even before she saw him. At approximately 5:00 p.m. near a pizza shop, MacPhail finally made himself known. He approached Holly directly, and he did something that stalkers and abusers are expert at. He manipulated her into a more vulnerable position. He persuaded Holly to talk with him in a nearby alleyway. Maybe he said he just wanted to talk, to understand why she had ended things, to get closure. Maybe he promised it would only take a minute. Maybe he played on her guilt or her sympathy. Holly agreed to talk to him in the alleyway. She probably thought she was being kind, giving him a chance to say whatever he needed to say so he would finally leave her alone. She probably thought that talking to him in a semi-private space would be less embarrassing than having a conversation in front of her friends or other people in the town center. She made the decision that many stalking victims make, the decision to engage one more time in hopes that it will end the harassment. But Logan MacPhail hadn't brought Holly into that alleyway to talk. He had brought a kitchen knife from home. And once they were alone, once Holly was separated from her friends and away from direct public view, he attacked her. The attack on Holly Newton was described by witnesses and later by the judge as vicious and brutal, words that don't even begin to capture the horror of what MacPhail did in that alleyway. He stabbed Holly 36 times, 36 separate wounds inflicted in approximately 60 seconds. That's more than one stab wound every 2 seconds. This wasn't a single strike in a moment of rage. This was sustained, relentless violence. The force MacPhail used was so extreme that the knife blade snapped. He was stabbing Holly with such intensity that the weapon literally broke from the force of impact. Medical examiners would later confirm that many of the wounds were deep, forceful, intended to cause maximum damage. MacPhail wasn't trying to scare Holly or hurt her just enough to make a point. He was trying to kill her, and he succeeded. When a 15-year-old boy, a friend or acquaintance who happened to be nearby, saw what was happening and tried to intervene to save Holly's life, MacPhail turned on him as well. The boy was stabbed 4 times in the shoulder, arm, and thigh. His injuries were serious enough to require surgery. This teenager had shown incredible courage, trying to stop a knife attack to save someone else's life, and he nearly died for his bravery. The attack only ended when passers-by heard the commotion and came running. Multiple people had to physically pull MacPhail away from Holly and restrain him to stop the violence. Even then, even with people holding him, MacPhail's first words were telling. He reportedly claimed that Holly had been horrible or awful to him, still blaming her, still making himself the victim even as she lay dying from 36 stab wounds he had inflicted. Then he asked, "Oh, what have I done?" Holly Newton died from her injuries. The 15-year-old girl who loved animals and dancing and her family, who was preparing for her GCSEs, who should have had her whole life ahead of her, was dead. Murdered by her ex-boyfriend in broad daylight in a town center because she had dared to end their relationship. When police arrested MacPhail, he told them, "I was meant to kill myself, but it went too far." This statement would become important during the trial because it suggested MacPhail had brought the knife with a specific purpose in mind. He claimed he had intended to kill himself in front of Holly, itself an abusive tactic used to manipulate and control, but that instead he had killed her. The statement implied awareness, planning, and intent. The investigation that followed was complicated by MacPhail's personal circumstances. He had been diagnosed with autism and had a low IQ. He attended a special school designed for students with learning difficulties. These factors would later become part of his defense strategy, with his lawyers arguing that his mental state and cognitive limitations affected his culpability. Logan MacPhail was charged with murder and wounding with intent for stabbing the boy who tried to save Holly. When the case went to trial at Newcastle Crown Court, MacPhail admitted to manslaughter but denied murder. This is a common defense strategy in cases involving defendants with mental health issues or cognitive impairments. Admit that you caused the death, but argue that you didn't have the mental state required for a murder conviction. MacPhail's defense centered on his claim that his mind was blank during the attack. He argued that he had no intention of hurting Holly, that he had brought the knife to kill himself, not to harm her. According to this narrative, MacPhail had planned to commit suicide in front of Holly, a horrific form of emotional manipulation and abuse in itself. But something had gone wrong and he had attacked her instead. The problem with this defense was that it didn't align with the evidence or with common sense. A person who intends to kill himself doesn't stab another person 36 times with such force that the knife blade breaks. A person experiencing a dissociative blank state doesn't methodically stalk someone for 45 minutes, wait for them to be alone, and then execute a sustained attack. A person who accidentally harms someone in a moment of confusion doesn't also stab a bystander who tries to intervene 4 times in multiple body locations. During the trial, MacPhail's testimony was inconsistent and contradictory. At one point, he briefly admitted that he had attacked Holly out of anger, a moment of honesty that suggested he understood exactly what he had done and why. But he quickly backtracked, returning to his claim that he never intended to cause her harm, that his mind was blank, that he couldn't remember the attack clearly. The prosecution presented evidence that painted a very different picture of MacPhail's state of mind. The night before the murder, he had traveled 40 miles to stand outside Holly's house until 1 in the morning. That's not the behavior of someone experiencing a mental health crisis. That's the behavior of someone who is obsessed and determined. On the day of the murder, he left school early and traveled by bus to Hexham specifically to find Holly. He stalked her for nearly an hour through the town center. These were calculated, purposeful actions. The judge would later note in his sentencing remarks that MacPhail had been filled with resentment and jealousy and had calculated where best to attack Holly. The choice of the alleyway wasn't random. It was a location that was semi-private, away from direct public view, where MacPhail could attack Holly with less risk of immediate intervention. The bringing of a kitchen knife from home showed premeditation. The 45-minute stalking period showed patience and determination. Perhaps most damning was the evidence of MacPhail's behavior in the period leading up to the murder. His refusal to accept that Holly had ended their relationship. His deep unhappiness at the thought she might see someone else. His escalating stalking behavior, showing up at her house, following her, refusing to leave her alone. All of this demonstrated a pattern of obsessive, controlling behavior that had been building toward violence. The jury heard all of this evidence. They heard MacPhail's claims that he didn't intend to hurt Holly, that his mind was blank, that it was all a terrible accident. They heard the defense's arguments about his autism and low IQ affecting his ability to form intent. But they also heard about the 36 stab wounds, the broken knife blade, the sustained nature of the attack, the stalking that preceded it, and MacPhail's own admission that he had attacked out of anger. In August 2024, after considering all the evidence, the jury reached their verdict: guilty of murder and guilty of wounding with intent. The jury determined that despite MacPhail's personal circumstances and his claims about his mental state, the evidence showed he had intended to kill Holly Newton when he attacked her in that alleyway. The sentencing hearing for Logan MacPhail brought Holly Newton's family face to face with the person who had destroyed their lives. Mikala Trussler, Holly's mother, had to sit in that courtroom and listen to details about her daughter's final moments. The stalking, the manipulation to get her alone, the 36 stab wounds, the broken knife blade. She had to hear MacPhail's attorneys argue for leniency based on his age and cognitive limitations. She had to endure the judicial process, while her daughter's absence echoed in every moment. The judge, Mr. Justice Hilliard, faced the difficult task of sentencing a juvenile offender for murder. MacPhail was 16 at the time of the offense and 17 by the time of sentencing. Under UK law, juvenile offenders convicted of murder receive a sentence called detention at His Majesty's pleasure, which is the juvenile equivalent of a life sentence. But the judge also had to determine the minimum term, the number of years MacPhail would have to serve before becoming eligible for parole consideration. Judge Hilliard acknowledged MacPhail's personal circumstances during sentencing. He noted that MacPhail had autism and learning difficulties. He mentioned that MacPhail had made progress in his education while in custody awaiting trial. These were mitigating factors that the judge was required to consider under the law. Logan MacPhail is serving a life sentence with a minimum of 17 years for murdering Holly Newton. Holly's mother, Mikala, has said that MacPhail ruined our lives, words that capture only a fraction of the devastation this murder caused. Holly should have been collecting her GCSE results in 2024. She should be in 6th form now, thinking about university, building her future. Instead, her family visits a grave. Mikala has called for changes in the law regarding domestic violence and stalking protections for young people, arguing that the systems meant to protect children like Holly failed catastrophically. Holly Newton's death is a reminder that domestic violence and femicide aren't just adult problems. They happen to teenagers too. And Logan MacPhail's 17-year minimum sentence is a reminder that jealousy and obsession are never excuses for taking a human life.